The NFL suffered a major blow to both its image and integrity when Judge Richard Berman nullified Tom Brady's 4-game suspension for Deflategate. What's next for the NFL? And what can they learn from this fiasco? How can they work with the Players Union to ensure they do everything in their power to minimize these sort of situations from happening again? Dan Matthews covers the Atlanta Falcons for Score Atlanta. He joined me on Wednesday to provide a national perspective on this very topic. So, Dan, first of all, we want to welcome you to the Two Man Advantage podcast, and we are excited to talk some football with you this afternoon.
Hey, as am I, man. It's going to be a lot of fun, and, who can ever get enough talking about this sport?
So, as we know, the Deflategate saga went on for 7 months too long. But when we finally got a ruling from Judge Richard Berman, he talked about the lack of notice that Brady could be suspended, and the first time ever of someone being suspended for the knowledge of being generally aware. So can you tell me where you thought the NFL went wrong when it comes to Deflategate?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that it was really just, to me, from the outside, and obviously I don't cover the Patriots, and I'm not around the NFL enough to know specifically how they deal with certain situations. But I think in a situation like this, the NFL, especially with last year, with what happened, facing so many critics for the way that certain situations were happening, and I don't think I need to go into the history of that, but I think that that's what Tom Brady and the Patriots were up against, is a situation where it's one of those deals you can't look soft on anything around the league, and in this case it was the old integrity of the game argument that came into play. And so Commissioner Goodell or Troy Vincent, whoever you necessarily say, issued the punishment, definitely wanted to make an example, and they tried to as best they could. And obviously, Tom Brady and the Patriots knew that, or at least Tom Brady, for that matter, knew that there was a way for him to find another avenue to get back onto the field, and he did. And now they're kind of back at square one in terms of how punishment is dealt with in the NFL.
Now, you led into my next question about Roger Goodell. Now, this is the fourth time that he's had disciplinary decisions overturned by judges. If you looked at Bountygate, the Adrian Peterson and Ray Rice situations, and now obviously this one. So how do you think the role of the commissioner should change, if at all?
Well, obviously that's not going to happen until the next CBA, and it shouldn't. That's what both sides collectively bargain, is they bargain to have him be the everything that the players say they can't stand about it. So that's really on them and DeMaurice Smith if they really weren't a big fan of that. Now, I understand in negotiations there's some give and take, and some things you necessarily like. You're never going to come away from everything 100% happy with what you have. That's the art of negotiations. That's what it is. So you've got to compromise a little bit on that. But in terms of how the punishment's going to go, I think Goodell's going to continue to do what he's doing because really, other than the examples that you brought up, it really hasn't been any real reason to change it. Before I came here to Atlanta, I was in Houston when both Brian Cushing and Dwayne Brown got suspended in the same season. And I remember that Robert McNair, the owner of the team, even went up to New York and met with Goodell as kind of like a, hey, not necessarily asking for leniency, but just to kind of, plead their side too, and let him kind of hear about, the player that Brian Cushing is and everything and how it goes, and ended up upholding the 4-game suspension for him, even through the appeals and everything else. So, I just really, it's one of those things. It's kind of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I know that some people might say that it's broken, but I don't necessarily think that Goodell or anybody else feels that way. At least the interview that I heard with Mike and Mike in the morning, the day that we found out the news about Tom Brady, I did not get the sense that it's changing anytime soon.
Now, you touched on this in your last answer, but when the last CBA was signed, obviously the players agreed to this, and now because that think that Goodell has overstepped his boundaries. They've complained about it. So, do you think the players have a legal leg to stand on, or a moral leg to stand on when it comes to wanting the discipline to be shifted?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of like the legality and everything like that, I mean, obviously I'm not an attorney, so I can't speak on that. But in terms of the morality, I guess, even as you said, I think that it's one of those deals that, in certain situations, let's just take, and that's the other thing is too, is there's so many different webs and offshoots of everything in ways that players, personnel, front office people, I mean, whatever it might be, can get punished in this league. And I think you run into a situation where it's one of those deals, like let's just say performance enhancing drugs, for example. If a player gets caught and they know for a fact that they got caught doing it, more often than not, they'll just say, hey, you know what, I'll take my 4 games and come back. Personal conduct policy, it's one of those deals that I think it's up to a player that if you know that you're wrong in this situation and within the letter of the law of the league, which is the obviously governing body that they're under, then that's up for you to decide if you're going to fight back or if you're going to go ahead and take the 4 games, 2 games, however many games given to you. So I think it's kind of one of those things that it can be a tricky situation where it's an individual situation for every single player. But as a whole, though, I mean, I think we've seen such a divide between these two sides in the way that, I mean, and I even heard this before the next CBA was agreed upon, where this was just continuing. And I think that was really the time when we learned that Roger Goodell, it's kind of a strong line in the sand that he's with the owners and the players are with the players.
Now, what do you think is the key for the union and the league to work together to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Well, I don't necessarily think that it's a situation that's never going to happen again. I mean, I think there is going to be another situation that's just kind of the way that business is, where and that's the other thing is too is I think it comes down to is that the NFL is a business, and it's one of those deals that for a guy like Roger Goodell, is he necessarily ever in trouble? I always say to people, just follow the money. That was advice that was given me many years ago, is just in anything in business, follow the money. And it's one of those deals that if ratings and money and everything else kind of starts to dip a little bit, then maybe you could see him being in a little bit of trouble. But in terms of the relationship with the players, I don't think that's going to change. I mean, I think that everything it's the old saying, what's done is done. And now it's completely just the way that the relationship is between both the players and Roger Goodell.
Now, in your opinion, do you think Tom Brady did anything wrong with Deflategate, or do you think the NFL overreached?
I think they overreacted. I think would probably be the way that I'd say, and it's a deal where it was kind of a situation for the league and for Goodell to be able to say we're coming down hard on players for things that they do, and the whole integrity of the game argument that we hear a lot in baseball, and really I don't think until Goodell came along we really heard it mentioned a lot in football, but obviously it's there. There's people who definitely want to uphold that, but at the same time though too, it's I get back to what Mike Zimmer said at the Senior Bowl to one of the reporters about deflated footballs didn't make the Colts lose that game. So I think it's one of those deals where you had so many a confluence of different things. Because another thing that I didn't even mention is the fact that a lot of people already brand the Patriots as cheaters as it is. With what happened with Spygate and everything like that, and then now too, did they tamper with the Steelers' headphones or did they not? All that kind of stuff. So I think it's one of those deals that people just they expect it to automatically be a guilty verdict for the Patriots whenever any type of cheating scandal comes out. And with all that being said, I think the things pointed towards the fact that we were going to see a harsh punishment on somebody. We were also going to see probably draft picks taken away. And we were also going to see fines. We saw all 3 of them, and only one of those was upheld.
Now, what do you think is the most important lesson that the league, the fans, and the players can take away from Deflategate?
Oh, man, that's a really good question. Man, I mean, I don't necessarily know. I mean, I think maybe It's one of those deals that you go ahead and have, like, for example, in baseball, you know how for performance enhancing drugs, you're caught once, it's 50-game suspension. You're caught twice, 100 games. And I believe it is 3 strikes, no pun intended with the game, but I believe 3 strikes and you're banned for life from the game. So I think that there should be maybe a harsh guideline of not necessarily well, this guy's going to get 4 games, you're only going to get 2, all that kind of stuff. I think that you probably should have a guideline set up where you do work with DeMaurice Smith and the Players Association to be able to say, if this happens, that's a 2-game suspension. If this happens, that's a 4-game suspension, and on down the line. I think if you do have clear-cut rules, at least you probably will have at least one less iron in the fire of things that can really stoke this and continue to strain the relations between the players and the league.
Now that the initial phase of this is over, what are your top 5 headlines throughout the entire NFL season you'll be keeping an eye on early in the season?
Oh, man. I think number one is how can teams like the one here in Atlanta, like the Falcons, how can they bounce back? I think we saw a significant difference the other night in what they were able to do in a close ball game, because there were games last year that I remembered sitting inside the Georgia Dome where it was a close game, you didn't have confidence. And that was one of those deals, and I know they only did it once, and maybe they will have another situation like that where they're on the other end, like the Eagles were the other night. So I think that's one, is what can they do with these new teams with new coaches. I think that's kind of 1 and 2. I'd say number 3 is, can the Patriots repeat? I think that's another one that you can look at. And then also number 4 is the Colts. Can they necessarily live up to the hype that they had coming into this season? Because we all saw last Sunday, Buffalo definitely had a huge surprise for them. Yes, and then I think number 5 is, does the Seahawks reign in the NFC West? Does it continue? Or are we seeing a team with a bunch of really good players in the St. Louis Rams, where their biggest thing has been not only the quarterback position, but it's been keeping that quarterback healthy. So we see what Nick Foles can do if he's able to stay healthy with that offense. And then also you add Todd Gurley, a player that I'm obviously very familiar with here in Georgia. And then I think another dynamic in that league is the Arizona Cardinals showed last year that without Carson Palmer, they were not quite the team they were, but with Carson Palmer, they're a really formidable opponent. And then, even in that division, I know it's just one game, again, kind of getting back to the Falcons thing earlier, but the 49ers didn't necessarily look like a team that's going to be just a layover for teams. So maybe that could be a really fun division to watch all season long.
My final question for you is a 2-parter. You had mentioned before that before you came to Atlanta, you covered the Texans. So I'm wondering your thoughts on what we saw with Hard Knocks this year, the Texans quarterback situation, and secondarily, what do you think of the Falcons under new head coach Dan Quinn?
Well, I'll hit the first one. I thought it is honestly the best season that Hard Knocks has had. I really do, because I just think that you truly saw the players, you saw the coaches, you saw not as much of the front office. I mean, I know Bob McNair and many people in that organization, which both Atlanta and Houston, just class organizations. I mean, you couldn't ask for a luckier situation of teams to cover. And I just thought that the storylines were just genuine. You felt yourself really rooting for players like Charles James II, Lyndon Trail, Courtney Brown, any of those players. You really felt yourself rooting for them. And also, too, I thought, a lot of people, focused on the swearing of Bill O'Brien and Mike Vrabel and some of the players and all that kind of stuff. But I thought it was kind of one of those things that, hey, look, if that's who they are, that's who they are. And I know one guy that played for Bill O'Brien here in Atlanta at Georgia Tech, and I asked him, I said, is that who he is? He says, oh, yeah, no, that's who he is. So I thought that was really cool. And then the second part with the Falcons, this is a team that just, I think, truly believes. And the thing is, it's not to say, anything against Mike Smith, because Mike Smith, that should never be overwashed, what he did with the Falcons. He came in and it wasn't necessarily a huge hire from the fan perspective. They kind of looked at it as, who is this guy? And then he came in and took this organization to heights that they had never been before. I know that they've been to a Super Bowl, but consistently year in and year out, he was able to do some great things. Now you bring in Dan Quinn, who is a coach that has had much experience in the league with Steve Mariucci. He's even coached on the college level at Florida. and then, of course, most recently with the Seattle Seahawks. But he really brings that competitive atmosphere that we hear about from Pete Carroll and from the Seahawks all the time. And the players have bought in, and they bought in from really pretty much day one. And it's just a completely different feel around here from the standpoint of, not to say that there wasn't positivity before, but let's just say it's gone even higher. And you definitely, too, you see it from even the veterans, too. I mean, Matt Ryan responds to it. Julio Jones responds to it. Roddy White. And we even saw an inspired team play on Monday night, too, and what they were able to do against the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, that was an effort that I think fans hadn't necessarily seen in the last couple of seasons.
Well, Dad, we want to thank you for your time this afternoon, and we had a ton of fun talking football with you on the Two Man Advantage podcast, buddy.
Yeah, no, hey, it was awesome, and anytime you guys want me, man, just holler out.
Fantastic. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care. Take care, man.